Hello and welcome to the Celtic State of Mind Friday Bulletin. Today I'm joined by Kevin Graham, Jim Orr and Alan Morrison. I've been on plenty of shows with Kevin. I'm pretty sure this is my first show with Jim and Alan, so I'm looking forward to hearing what they've got to say. And it's a very divisive period for Celtic. There's lots of opinions flying around and everybody's got them. So there's plenty to talk about. And the first place I want to start is the game on Wednesday. Kevin, I don't think you've had a chance to talk about that on the show yet. It was more of the same, really, from what we've seen from Celtic. It was really the same as we saw against Aberdeen, same as we saw against Ross County. It was just a bit tepid, devoid of ideas, devoid of inspiration, I would say, Kevin.
I would absolutely argue with that. I think we were all right in the first half against Aberdeen compared to the 90 minutes against Ross County and Hibs. I think it's very, very clear now we're watching a dreadful Celtic side with dreadful players, dreadful tactics and a dreadful manager. But we are not a dreadful side. We haven't got dreadful players. We've maybe just got a manager that's no fully there. I didn't expect Rodgers to be there at the end of the season. I'm getting a whiff of Ronnie Dyler's last days round about this. And I think we'll be going to Ibrox in April to try and keep ourselves in the race. And it's not going to surprise me on Monday if we're out the Scottish Cup either. We're dreadful. We're just dreadful at this moment in time. We play like sedated penguins in Edinburgh that walk about. and it's just like, it's rubbish, man. Absolutely rubbish. But what Rodgers has done to that side, granted, he's lost quite a lot of players. Granted, he's had injuries. But we should not be struggling against the sides that we're absolutely struggling against. And it's all down to him.
Yeah, the Hibs team that we played on Wednesday, it's a team that St Mirren absolutely blew away in the first half. And St Mirren, Kwon was one of their star players in that game. And he didn't even feature for Celtic in the first half of the season. It's a game that we really should be comfortably win. Jim, I want to come to yourself. Last time you were on the show, Adam Ida, I'm sure a lot of us hadn't even heard of him at that point. So you haven't been on since the end of the transfer window. So I just want to get your thoughts on the transfer window as a whole and on the performance on Wednesday, because I'm sure you've got a lot to get off your chest here.
It's actually good to have Kevin on, because I'm usually the Mr. Negative guy, but Kevin's just burst in there. Magic. So anything nasty is going to sound good now. I think at the end of the day, we're still joint top. They win their game in hand. So the season is salvageable. If we're 10 points behind like we were in Neil Lennon's last season, then we'd be, in real trouble. I think one or two things happen. I haven't been on the socials the last few days. Haven't seen any podcasts. I've been busy with Benelli Bertie, which started last night. And I think we've got two options here. Option number one is the manager has to change his tactics because he's been sussed out. You mentioned those games, James. I mean, you go back to Kilmarnock, and I think it's one of the poorest SPFL seasons. I think the teams are pretty poor, and they're making us look pretty average. And I think that's down to the tactics, as Kevin was saying there. That if you look at the Kilmarnock game, they try and stay in the game at half time. If they're a goal down level, they up their game. They maybe push forward 20 yards up the pitch. They put us in trouble, and we lose against Kilmarnock. Carbon copy against Aberdeen last week. We should have lost the game against Aberdeen. If it wasn't for Joe Hart, we would have lost the game, and we should have lost the game on Wednesday. We're just, as Kevin said, we're just absolutely appalling. So teams have sussed us out, and we shouldn't have been in this position given the players that we have. And one of the things I've said in the past is, how do you know what a good manager is? A good manager has a team that's more than some of the parts. You look at Jock Stein, you look at Brian Clough, if you go back to the old days like that Alan and I will remember, they weren't great players. They had 2 or 3 very good players, but in the main, they were kind of workmanlike, good guys, but Stein and Clough made them into a team. We are less than some of the parts just now, and that has to be the manager. It has to be the manager. And either he changes tactics, he goes with 2 up front, he just does something different, because the players are there. They're not bad players. And if that's not the option that they pick, then option number 2 is have to change the manager. Because, as Kevin said, that's the problem. So change your tactics or change the manager. I don't think they're going to change the manager. I think we've had a board, and Kevin has said this many, many times, we've had a board who don't take tough decisions. I think they take easy decisions, and when they're faced with a tough decision, they don't take it. And if you contrast that with what's happening across the city, I'm not saying what they're doing is right, but Van Bronckhorst, a sticky patch fired, you're away. Beale, sticky patch, bang, you're away. If you go back to Neil Lennon's last season, how many times, when I think the podcast, the daily bulletin started during that season, how many weekends were saying, they must let him go this weekend, they must let him go. And it didn't happen. And it was, as I said at the time, death by 1,000 cuts that season. They had to make a big decision, and they didn't make it. And get rid of the manager would be a huge decision at this point in time. And from what we've heard, there's lots of things behind the scenes. So I don't think they would do that. So if we're going to salvage this season, I think we have to change the tactics.
Well, Alan, if you're thinking tactical change, you're a resident stats man. If you're looking at the performance from Wednesday, is there any sort of stats that jumped out of you, or perhaps was there any positives to take from the game? Kevin mentioned that he thought the first half performance was pretty decent. Would you take any positives from that game? And
that was against Aberdeen. I thought the first half performance was decent. Like the first half performance at Easter Road was like an overdose of Valium, man. That's what it was like.
Was there any positives that you would take from the game, or was there any stats, even negative ones, that really jumped out to you from that game? What caught your eye?
Ricky, so is it fall to me to talk things up again? We're not in a good way, are we? The 3 games since the break have followed a bit of a pattern where Celtic have actually started all of them pretty well, in all honesty, and had a control of the game. So, and you're right, James, I look at the performance really more than the results, because that's what will give you a better indicator of what's going to happen going forward. And in all 3 games, I look for control, but you look for control and you look for then sort of penetration in terms of, watch the quality of the chances that we're creating. And in all 3 games, I would say 2 of them we got an early goal, and in all 3 of them we pretty much controlled the game. Aberdeen hadn't had a shot at goal at Pittodrie until they scored. But what was really telling about all 3 games was the extent to which control was lost, and the performance unravelled the longer it went on. Now, that's worrying. Because that speaks to that lack of cohesion. Does speak to organisation, frankly. And to the lads' points, as I've been saying all season, we haven't replaced quality with quality. Never mind pushing the squad forward in terms of overall depth and quality. It has actually regressed, and that's on the club. That's on the club. That's on the club not supporting the manager, right? But where we are now, knowing what we've got, I do agree we're not seeing the coherence of performance. If it was just control and it was a bit slow and a bit ponderous, etc., as people often say, even that I would kind of accept if we were kind of reasonably dominant within that. But what was the most worrying, you asked for a stat, was really the lack of creativity and the lack of chances that we created from open play against Hibs. I mean, it was one of the lowest that I've got on record, and it was probably in the top 3 for the least amount of expected goals created from open play. And one of those 3 was when we had to play Hibs during the COVID season, and I think 6 or 8 players or something we couldn't pick. We had a shadow squad out, and the second of those 3 was at Ibrox earlier this season. So that's worrying, because if that becomes a trend, then that's going to, over a longer term, we're not going to score. Basically, we're not going to score as many goals as we need to do. So I agree that we can't carry on as it is. The players are the players. We do continually seem to have to be changing the lineup for one reason or another. There has been a lot of disruption. The manager's right to point that out. But at some point, you've got to stop feeling sorry for yourself, and you've got to come up with a coherent plan that gets the best out of the players that you do have. And this system doesn't do that, because the wingers are continually not producing. We've virtually ruined Kyogo through the lack of service, the lack of quality into him, where you've got a player who, if you give him the ball in good positions, his finishing is extraordinary, actually, even at European level. I know it's not against good opposition. So we have to do something that either gets the best out of him or change the way that we play, because we got away with it. You can point to the 2 wins and a draw out of those 3 very poor performances. And the other thing I'll just finish on, which is a positive, is that, as Jim says, we're right in it. We're still at the top of the league. I would say this is Celtic at the worst version of themselves at the moment in terms of the cohesion and the way that we're playing. And I would argue that the other team at the top of the league, you're probably seeing them at the best. And so, we're right in it. We're right in it. This isn't 2021 over again, right? It's not that, okay? But we has to find a solution. Rodgers has to find a solution.
Yeah, you mentioned it's different from that 2020, 2021 season. It still feels salvageable, but we're just waiting for the turning point and wondering when that turning point is going to come. Wondering when Rodgers is going to change things up and get a tune out of these players. You mentioned Kyogo. There's a moment late on in the game where he gets the ball in the box and he's hesitant. He hesitates and he loses the ball, and that's the chance to go 2-1 up. A massive opportunity. He's really lacking confidence at the moment, and I wonder if he'll play this weekend. I mean, Adamaida, 2 goals as much as they were penalties. That could be enough to bring him into the team. I'm not too sure. He could come into the team. But Kevin, it took 2 penalties to get us over the line. Alan mentioned the lack of chance creation. It's one of the lowest that he's seen. 2 penalties to get over the line. We're really on the ropes in that second half at a point as well. After Hibs get the equaliser, it was evident that the Celtic team was rattled.
Aye, and it's very easy to rattle the Celtic team. You score against them. That's it. As soon as you score against a Celtic team, we are completely rattled, and that comes from a lack of belief in what we're actually doing. I think a lack of belief in the system, a lack of belief in what the manager's telling us to do, and a lack of belief that they're the same side. This is a transition. That is really a transition. I think they're going to go through a transition in the summer. I think it's really clear that the board have no backed Rodgers because they ken that he's off, and I think the players have got whiff of that as well. It's all teams need. If we go a goal behind, we'll struggle. And I says this last week. If we go a goal behind, it we'll struggle. I mean, Hibs came out the other night there after they equalised, and you were going, well, they look more likely to win this game. They absolutely look more likely to win this game. And what Rodgers done to change the game was something that we would have done. There was nothing magical that he done. He made the same changes that we would have actually done. He went like for like. He went done this and that. There was nothing spectacular. There was nothing spectacular whatsoever. I mean, I think if you want to have a look at the lack of what we've lost and the lack of resource that what he's actually got available at the moment, Bernabe was the highest transfer on the pitch in that first half. He was our biggest transfer fee on the pitch in that first half. Now, that shows you the lack of foresight and planning the football side have, the football operations department, because I'm blaming them. The football operations department do have that. The fact that we've got a back four of Bernabe, Ralston, Scales, and Welsh. Oh, come on, wait a minute. What's actually gone wrong here? That is a massive red flag. Scales and Welsh just passed each other. Bernabe, some folk are talking up he was man of the match, but it was a very, very low bar. And a lot of folks seem to think Anthony Ralston's 80-odd minutes of absolute mediocrity can get made up for a great tackle 25 years for goal, which leads to the penalty kick. It is a dreadful, dreadful state of affairs. And I can't see the manager changing it. I can't see the man, because he's too stubborn. The manager is too stubborn. He looks a shadow of himself. It's like somebody's put. Don't remember that guy that does the impressions of Brendan Rodgers, whatever his name is. Can't remember his name.
Darren something, yeah.
That's the Brendan Rodgers we've got. The Brendan Rodgers we remember at left and went to Leicester is now long, long gone. And I want to win the league, but there has to be major changes. Major changes.
Yeah, it needs to be major changes. Fans have been calling out for it after the January window. They were calling for it after the summer window. The doubts were there, and we're now seeing the results of we've seen the results of it. We've got 700 people watching live. I want to get some of your comments in. Keep commenting. We're going to bring them up throughout the show. Should have gone for Maresca. Looks like they're going up again. Rodgers is useless. Maresca, he was one of the targets for, I think it was 2 or 3 years running. Celtic were looking for Maresca. Sean Doyle, our purple patch was when they had our first choice 11 for 2 games. That's one thing I'll say about Rodgers this season. There's been very rare moments where you could say the strongest 11 when fully fit is there. PADDY has been always injured this season. Cameron Carter-Vickers has been always injured since last April. There's barely been a moment where we've been able to play Cameron Carter-Vickers for a good 5 or 6 games in a row. Ridiculizer coming in. Of course, Adam Ida is referring to he starts. He scored 2 goals, penalties or not. Well, that's something we've been saying Keogh hasn't done over the last few weeks. It's the goals have really dried up. But I want to go back to that game, Jim. It really felt like in the second half there was an inevitability that Hibs were going to go on and get a second. It didn't happen in the end, but that just speaks to the confidence that we have in this team at the moment, that we were expecting the team to go on and concede a second and drop more points at a Hibs side who, I think the only team they've beat since the start of December was Forfar in the Scottish Cup, and they did take us all the way in the league. It's a worrying sign, isn't it?
Kev, see, every time I'm on, can you be on as well, pal? Because I must look the most positive person in the world. This is great. I'm loving this today. Loving it. We're still in it. We're definitely still in it. The manager has to step up. That's all we're saying. Step up and show what you're made of. Because I think this league will come down to one word, and that's hunger. On the pitch, even though the opposition are no great, I think they're showing more hunger than we are. I think they want to win this league. The last time I was on, I made a comment, and somebody said, "You're so anti-Celtic," and you're thinking, "You're a clown." That I said, "Why would Matt O'Reilly want to stay?" Because, you know, playing at Livingston, he's won the league, he's won the cup. Why do you want to stay?
Has Matt O'Reilly stayed?
Sorry?
Has he stayed?
Well, that's my next point. Basically,
I haven't seen him since January.
Well, if I'm Matt O'Reilly and I know that in a few months' time I've got a life-changing transfer coming up, I don't want to get injured. I'm not going to Livingston and going in for 50-50 challenges. You know, so that's totally understandable. And there's an argument to say that, you know, that like the Neil Lennon season when there was meant to be a few players who kind of checked out and we kept them. And I'm not saying we should have sold Matt O'Reilly, but maybe that might have made some sense if we'd have reinvested that. Because as you said, Kevin, he's been pretty poor. And that's understandable if these things are playing on his mind. But I think this will come down to hunger. And I'm not so sure that we've got a very hungry team. We've got a lot of young guys. And I've said before, I think the mix and who we're signing is totally wrong. I think for every young guy we sign, we should sign an experienced guy so that we've always got that kind of balance and you can bring these guys on. When you sign a whole lot of young guys, you're going to get inconsistency. Nicholas Kuhnke won against Aberdeen, really good. Hibs, non-existent. That's what you're going to get. And if you're going to win the leagues, you just can't put up with that. You really can't. You have to be Jota. You have to play every single week and play really well and contribute. You have to do that. And we're not doing it. So on the park, I'm not sure about the hunger. The managers, the big scary bloke over in Ibrox, you know, he's definitely hungry. You know, he's going to fight everyone. He wants to do it. Our manager interviewed after the game. These fans, you know, they criticise everyone and that. You know, do you see the hunger there? I don't. You get to the board and across the city. I mean, they're all in for this. They're spending money they don't have to try and win this. They're hungry. They want to win this. Our board, our chairman's statement a few months ago, well, just keep money in the bank just in case we don't make the Champions League. That's self-fulfilling to me. So I don't see hunger compared to the main rivals on the pitch, in the dugout, in the boardroom. And the league is too tight. If we were 5 or 6 points ahead, you think, well, we can maybe ride this out. It's too tight. They're going to win this game in hand. They're going to go top in goal difference. And as you said, Kevin, the game in April is huge. But even though you're looking that far apart, we're not confident we can beat anyone these days, and that's the issue. So the manager has to step up. He really has to step up. Or as I said, you change the manager, but the board are never going to make that decision. Never. What was the question? Hibs. And as Kevin said, it was just rubbish from start to finish. And scoring that early, you think, go on, make it a statement victory, score 4 or 5, do the goal difference, a power of good, do that. And we didn't do it. And we just looked clueless the whole game. And as you say, once Hibs scored, there was only ever going to be one winner. And it turned out not to be them. And, you know, as Celtic fans, we love to have a go at the referees and the conspiracy theories and all this kind of stuff. You know, albeit Nick Walsh should have given the penalty straight away, but VAR came to a rescue. You know, VAR came to a rescue in the Ibrox game with the Roof goal. You know, and I know it was like a lesser thing at the Celtic Park game and the kind of SEMA penalty thing. You know, so VAR's done us a few favours this season. So I don't think we should be as kind of anti-VAR and think about conspiracy theories and all that kind of stuff. We've actually done okay this year. But with regard to the Hibs game, as Alan said, I mean, Alan said, the stats tell you it was abysmal. It was one of the most abysmal games in terms of trying to create chances. The last 4 goals were scored, 2 deflections and 2 penalties. That's appalling for any Celtic team in any generation to play 4 games of football against a really poor Ross County, a really poor Aberdeen, and a really poor Hibs. 2 deflections and 2 penalty kicks. You can't defend that. You really can't.
Jim mentioned Matt O'Reilly this season. I think start of the season, first half of the season, Alan, he was the standout. He was far and away the player of the half season. But it feels like his performance levels have fell off since the turn of January, and it looks like with Matt O'Reilly's performance levels going down, the performance levels of the entire team have gone down as a whole. How reliant do you think Celtic were on Matt O'Reilly in that first half of the season? Because he was the man creating all the chances, he was the man scoring the goals, even last-minute goals to win us the 3 points. He was the man that was doing it all. Do you think we were too reliant on Matt O'Reilly the first half of the season and we're now seeing it?
Absolutely, and certainly in terms of he was virtually the only player creating chances for Kyogo, which he created more chances for Kyogo than anyone else last season, and he's already this season, when we're halfway through, had created as many chances for him because they just weren't coming from anywhere else. And then next on the list there would be Jota and Abada. That's not happened this season either. So there's a huge part of your problem in terms of the final third right there. And then, you know, Matt O'Reilly and Callum McGregor are playing 90 minutes every single game, game in, game out, and we're relying on those players. And as we've seen before, you can't just flog players to death. You know, we've seen it with Carter Vickers. We're not managing his injury situation well enough, and he's out for extended periods. That to me is unforgivable. That is negligence, actually, not to look after a key player like that. You know, Alice, it was unfortunate.
Kieran Tierney negligence, I would go as far as saying. And who was the manager last time of that? Oh dear, I don't know.
Well, maybe, but I mean, to be fair, Kevin, I suspect you'll find the same culture at every single professional football club. To me, it's a football culture problem, not looking after players and injury, and actually, it's the same in every sport. Rugby union's had this problem with head injuries and concussions. Anyway, but so you know, when it comes to it, we're relying on a core of players. We relied on Greg Taylor. He gets injured. We're relying on Alistair Johnson. He's injured. But guess what? You know, players like Scales who came in, and everyone was skeptical. I was skeptical. There was some benefit in him, you know, in terms of the longer he's played, the more steady he's got. And he's not spectacular. He'll always have his limitations. But it's almost like we saw with Bernabei on Wednesday. He had a pretty solid game overall. And it's almost like if you play players and you trust them and you give them a chance, maybe sometimes they will become more solid. You know, people criticising Kuhn. I mean, the kid's had, you know, he did look nervous. He didn't attack the fullback. All of that is true, but he's hardly played. You know, and this is what you've got. You're going to bring in a lot of players, especially young ones. There is a cost to giving them a chance, and at Celtic, you know, any draw or any drop points is considered too high a cost. There's so many structural issues with the makeup of the squad. Some of that is on Rodgers. A lot of it isn't. And he's having to kind of juggle that. I think he needs to stop making excuses. He needs to stop, you know, moaning about it. You just need, because as you say, I kind of shy away from using words like hunger because it's an easy trope and it's very difficult to evidence. I would posit that most players, most people are trying their best most of the time, right? And sometimes it comes off, sometimes it doesn't. When it doesn't, you can point a finger and shout lack of effort, lack of hunger. But to me, that's a pretty lazy sort of trope to make. It's a very thin line between hunger and recklessness as far as, you know, what the different clubs are trying to do to win this league. Are Celtic too conservative and too safe? Absolutely. Are the other lot reckless fiscally? Well, history shows us that is also true. Lack of hunger? I'm not sure it's that. So, you know, we come back to we've got an ever-changing cavalcade of players, but the current configuration isn't working. The problem that we had specifically against Hibs was that we weren't brave enough at the back. We had the two centre-backs passing continually between themselves. They needed to be braver. They needed to go through the lines. Now, were players making themselves available for them? You could also point that finger. I mean, but you've got some fundamental issues there, because if you're going to play Maeda as a winger, Maeda can only play the way he's facing. He cannot control a ball and change direction with it. It's beyond his skill set. Therefore, if you give him the ball with his back to you, you're only going to get it back. That's the only thing that's going to happen. Then on the other side, you've got a young lad who seemed very nervous, and so we ended up getting the ball back. So from the wingers, we're getting the ball back. From the two central midfielders, Bernardo and O'Reilly, McGregor was being man-marked. Were they doing enough to get themselves free, or were the central defenders brave enough to try and pass through the lines? Probably a bit of both. And therefore, you had a stalemate. You had a stalemate in building the play. So they have to find a way to resolve that. Some of it is to do with attitude, and some of it's to do with being positive on the ball, but some of it's to do with having the right configuration of players that you can actually progress the ball in a proactive way. And it looks like we haven't got a configuration, certainly in the wide areas, to actually make that happen. That's the area I'd focus on.
There's no relationships in the wide areas, Alan, because they've changed that many times. How do you expect Bernabé to have a relationship with Maeda? Maeda hasn't been there for the last couple of games, and Bernabé's only came in the last couple of games since Greg Taylor's been injured. How do you expect Alistair Johnson or Anthony Ralston to have a relationship with Kuhn on the other side, because he's just actually arrived in the club? In the midfield, what you're talking about, I don't think the midfield's got the right balance with it. I think we were kind of papered over the cracks. Bernardo's couple of goals in that, I struggle to see what he brings to that team, and Matt O'Reilly's form's dropped right off the face of the cliff, and Callum McGregor's getting no hand in the middle of that park, because he's getting man-marked out, and Bernabé and O'Reilly are no doing Bernardo and O'Reilly are no doing a month. But there's no relationships there. There's constant chopping and changing. There is a reason for that chopping and changing, but sometimes there's a reason for everything. You can actually talk yourself round to everything, but I don't think it helps that the wingers that we've actually got are quite poor, or in a poor number of, or in a poor spell of form. No, I'll be slack on them and just say they're under the weather a wee bit.
I think so. Again, relationships is a bit of a difficult one to. Again, if you look at last season, it almost wouldn't have mattered who you played at fullback, who you played in the wing, because the patterns of attacking were well rehearsed and well known. And we seem to have gone from that very highly structured, highly organized way of attacking, where everybody almost knew where they were supposed to be. They knew what the purpose of making a run was in terms of in to out or out to in. And it wouldn't almost have mattered who you played. The players understood what the system was. And we've kind of regressed to a more laissez-faire, get the ball to the wide players and then do some magic, right? But they're not, as you say, Kev, they're not of the quality, I don't think, to do that magic on a consistent basis. We see it from Palmer on occasion, and we may well see it from Kuhn, but you got to let the kid sort of bed in. But accepting that we've moved away from a highly structured way of playing to something far looser, then the manager probably, as we come back to, needs to step in and help them a bit.
You mentioned the wide areas. That was a big discussion there. I think the midfield has been a problem of the constant chopping and changing as well. I mean, Hatate picked up his first big injury that kept him out for weeks in about September time, and he picked up a few more injuries after that kept him out until this current moment. It took us until December, January to find the final player to complete that midfield three. Holm had a go, Turnbull had a go, Iwata had a go, and Rodgers was just constantly chopping and changing and not really getting a turn out of anybody. It was.
I still don't think we've got the answer though, James. I don't think Bernabé's that. I don't think Bernardo's that player. I really didn't. I think he's part of the problem as well.
Yeah, it was a few goals. Obviously, getting a goal in a derby is going to boost your standing amongst the Celtic support in any way. And I think he's been all right since then. I thought he was one of the better players of a bad bunch against Hibs during the week. If we're going to talk on the better players, I've got to talk about the man of the moment. I'm going to be a bit more positive here. I want to talk about Adam Ida. I thought it's easy to talk up the player who scored the 2 goals and a 2-1 win, but I thought even outside of the goals, I thought Ida was playing good as well. I thought he brought a different dynamic to the Celtic attack, holding the ball up and laying it off to the wingers. Jim, would you agree? What did you make of Adam Ida's first start for Celtic?
Before I answer that, when I was talking about hunger, I wasn't talking about kind of players' hunger on the pitch. They'll obviously try the best they can. And the issue I have is the fact that we beat Ross County 1-0 and there's boos at 90 minutes. Now, maybe the boos weren't for the players, maybe the boos are for the board. The players can't differentiate that. They won a game of football. That was Kuhn's first game. Come on, substitute. Hold on, the fans are booing. We just won a game. Club like no other. So we need to get behind the team. We're still in it. We're still well in it there. And I'm going to stick with hunger. Particularly in the boardroom. They want it more than we do. And I think if you're a player and you've won cups and you've won leagues, the hunger must go down. All the guys have won the league, they've won the cup. But across the city, it's going to be the first time. And I think they're much more hungry than us. In terms of the new guy, I thought he did okay. Individually, he could have scored a couple of goals from open play. Nerves of steel at the penalty, given how poor we've been at taking penalty kicks. I think he's a run of games to see what he's like. And I think what we're all saying is that we'd like to see a change of shape. I think we'd all love to see him and Kyogo up front to see how that goes. It was okay. It was nothing spectacular, but the fact he took the 2 penalties and they were huge in the context of the season speaks volumes.
Alan, just from watching the game, I felt like Ida was getting more chances than Kyogo usually gets. I don't know if that was better service or if it was just the spaces he was taking up. Would I be right in saying that, or would I be completely wrong?
I love how Alan started chuckling there before he had even finished that.
I saw the shaking the head.
No. Well, I think, listen, we had created 1 chance for him, I think, from open play. I think, well, actually 2. I think he got a header from that was from a corner. That wasn't from open
offside calls.
Yeah,
that's.
Then there was a couple of offside calls, but no, I mean this is a systemic problem. So we're not creating enough chances for the centre forward, in the system that we have. We've tried a 6'4" big lad, and we've tried a wee guy who's got absolutely world class movement, and therefore that tells you that either the players are not good enough that are trying to get the ball to him, or the system's fundamentally flawed. And it's only 2 games in. I thought he was, when I looked at his sort of data profile before, and I listened to people who knew him well and had seen a lot of him, it looked like almost a disastrous signing in terms of what I couldn't see any upside to it at all. Watched him against Aberdeen. I thought he was excellent actually against Aberdeen in the time that he was on the pitch, on a fiery pitch in a howling gale. His touch, his ability to bring the ball down, bring players into the game. I thought he did really well in that cameo performance against Aberdeen. Against Hibs, though, it was the same problem as we've had all season. We're just not creating good quality chances, and it's not for want of trying. In terms of one of the features of this season under Rodgers is we're actually trying to hit the striker earlier. We're trying more through balls. We're trying more long balls this season than we did under Postecoglou, because I think Rodgers recognises that if you let teams sit in, you're not going to get the best out of Maeda, for example. So if you've got somebody with the pace of Maeda and you want Maeda facing the goal, right, as I've said, you want to hit him earlier. And I think we've been trying to do that. We're just not very good at it. And it's not that we're very good at it. It's just a really highly difficult thing to do, to hit a 50-yard ball straight up the pitch and find your target, against 4 defenders. It's just really difficult. So we are actually trying. Rodgers is actually trying to be, in some ways, more direct. So that's why I say that there's many criticisms I'd make of Rodgers, but the whole slow, ponderous thing is a load of nonsense. The whole league is playing a faster form of football, noticeably, than last season. They're playing far more long balls in general. Our rivals are a good example of that. Celtic are playing far more long balls. Celtic are going more direct than what they did previously. It's a hard thing to do well. And what we seem to be sacrificing is an element of control. What we had under Rodgers the first time was a high level of control, but it was slow and ponderous. Postecoglou, he, I think, got a perfect balance between control and penetration in terms of the amount of successful aggressive forward passes, to the level of possession that we had of the ball. I don't think we've quite got that at the moment. But I think that's, as I say, it comes back to a mixture of the manager probably trying not to change things to keep the players comfortable with, in theory, a shape and a system that they know, but the personnel, in some respects, just aren't good enough. So therefore, we need to find a configuration, and that's on Rodgers to resolve that.
Alan, I take your stats on there brilliantly, but that game on Wednesday night, there was a point in the first half, and there's a point in every Celtic game that I've watched the season. The game for a long spell goes to walking pace, where nothing happens whatsoever apart from we pass the ball about every so often. That game on Wednesday night there, it looked like two teams that had one eye on the beach. They knew that their season was done, and they were just treading water to the end of the game, just to tick it off. And that's where I'm coming from the ponderous side of it, because we haven't got an intensity. And Rodgers will be in his press conference the day or the more spewing out all this verbal salad about intensity, bravery, counter-pressing and all of that. And I didn't see any of that whatsoever. I just see a lack of intensity and effort on the pitch to do what he actually says. That's what I think.
I think that's what's interesting about the stats, because the eye test for me, like yourself, Kevin, watched the game the other night, I think it was too slow. We're just keeping the ball. It's walking football almost, but obviously the stats say something different. So it's interesting to hear that the fact the stats say that, because I thought it was slow and ponderous, the kind of Welsh and scales, come on, get the ball at the pitch. And it is the fact maybe that we're not that confident in the players that we've got. And a PADDY comes on, contributes nothing. So don't give him the ball because he'll contribute nothing. So yeah, it's interesting the fact that the stats say something different from the eye test.
I think it's something to do with words. I mean, people use slow and ponderous, like specifically use that phrase over and over again, right? I'm not arguing there aren't problems. I'm just saying that isn't the problem. People are misattributing what the issues are, right? It's not the fact. We're completing more passes with possession this season than last. It's about 8. It's not by much. It's about 8 passes a game, but that suggests you're moving the ball quicker because you're completing more passes, right? So it's not that. I'm not saying there's not problems. It's just a misattribution of what the problem is. You label it slow and ponderous. That sticks, because I see that so many times. That isn't the problem, but there are problems. That's what I'm trying to say.
So the problem is
more long balls, more attempted through balls. We're pressing more, right? More aggressive pressing stats than last season, right? We're completing more passes for 90 minutes than we did last. All of that suggests we're actually playing quicker, but it can look really bad if you try and play quicker and you try and be more direct and it doesn't come off. You lose control. You lose an element of control, and it just looks bad when you're giving the ball away and you're not getting your striker in the game. That's the problem.
I think that's right in terms of the lack of quality that we've got. Because when you're at the game and you watch Kyogo, every single game he's making fantastic runs and nobody's passing to the guy. Either because we don't have the confidence to do that, or they're just too scared.
One thing I want to move on to, Kevin, you were speaking of some of the buzzwords that Brendan's going to mention in his upcoming press conference: intensity, a strong mentality, and you need that for the game this weekend. The Scottish Cup, you can't afford a slip up. There's no second chances. It's one game and one game only, and you've got to get it done. I think, how important, Kevin, do you think the Scottish Cup is going to be this season? How do Celtic fans define this season as a success or a failure when it comes to the end of the season? Do you need a league and a Scottish Cup for this season to be defined as a success?
The way, in my mind, that this season's gone, I think if we won the league, it's been a great season. And that is just because I just find it interesting. Alan's talking about the high press, and I just didn't see that. And that's something that I'll probably need to review myself, and I will go and review it, because that's the type of thing that I actually go and do. I like getting shot down and tell, no, if you go and have a look at this, I just see Rodgers spouting these words and his team not doing it. But I knew that you've actually pointed out the number of long balls that we play, or they try to pack passing. Is that what you call it? Is that the the passing that we're trying more and more often. If you look at the amount of times the ball just went out the park in Easter Road in the first half, the other night there, the amount of times we tried to play long balls through and their keeper just came out and got it. I get where you're coming from with that. I do get where you're coming from, but I didn't see a high press, and that's hang with that. I mean, what I will say, James, is I think for me, I'm just hoping to win the league, and at the moment, the way that we're playing and the confidence that seems to be around the club, the toxicity it seems to be around the club, I think winning the league would be a major achievement, and it shouldn't really be. It shouldn't really be after being 8 points clear in October and not charging on. And the January transfer window has just added to that as well. It feels like if you chuck the football operations department and the Celtic board into the North Sea, they wouldn't drown, they would just tread water. They would just go round and round in circles. And I think that's where we are. We win the league and we move on. And for me, that's it. I want a wee day out at Hampden. I love the Scottish Cup and all of that, but I just don't think we've got enough depth in the squad to handle going on two fronts. And that's sad to actually say.
If I was to ask you the same question when Rodgers first got appointed, what would you define as a successful season? You would have said a treble, probably. I would have said being in Europe after Christmas and winning a knockout game. That's what I would have said. You didn't get that. Jim, I'll ask you the same sort of question. Do you think Celtic need a Scottish Cup for this season to be defined as a success? I mean, you look at last season, a treble winning team. You look at every season Brendan Rodgers has been at Celtic apart from this, and there was trebles there, including an invincible treble. Would you say that there needs to be a Scottish Cup there to have a successful season?
Nah, they have to win the league, as Kevin said. That doesn't matter. I mean, if you back 40 years or so, winning the Scottish Cup, winning the league, there maybe wasn't that much between them, but the riches in the Champions League means that the Scottish Cup, as Kevin said, it's nice to have a wee day out at Hampden in May in the sunshine, but in the greater scheme of things, if we end up just winning the Scottish Cup, this has been a disastrous season. So it doesn't. I actually think the game on Sunday is a chance for him to change things, because if you're going to change things that doesn't work, then I'd rather get knocked out of the Scottish Cup than drop more points in the league, because it's all about the league. It really is all about the league. And yeah, I would experiment on Sunday. I would try something, because we're all saying the same thing. He has to try something different. So why not try it on Sunday? Because if we get knocked out of the cup, we get knocked out of the cup. We can't drop any more points. And I think he has to learn from the changes that he makes. So yeah, I know there'll be people in the comments saying, "Oh, you want to win the Scottish Cup?" Of course, you want to win the Scottish Cup. It would be great, but I think if that's all we win this season, it'll be looked as a failure.
No, it's a tough game this weekend. We're looking at every game at the moment as a tough match. And Mirren put 3 past that Hibs team that we really struggled against during the week. Alan, what are your feelings towards the game this weekend? How is your confidence going into this game at Paisley? I mean, if you look back in January, a matter of a month ago, we beat St Mirren 3-0 there. It was fairly comfortable. I thought it was one of our better displays this season as well. Maeda, O'Reilly and Greg Taylor on the score sheet. How are you feeling heading into this game?
I agree with the guys. I mean, and I've been saying this since June. You know, there's a revamped Champions League next season. We've got more games and the overall pot size increases. You're looking at anything between 50, 60 million. In the context of Scottish football, that is an enormous amount of money. And in the context of specifically the financial performance of Celtic, where they are today, and their rivals, it pretty much, sets you up for the next 10 plus years as a club, right? In terms of Celtic could then, I believe, start to make some more strategic decisions about the management, the football operations, even the extent to which you do bring in more sort of younger players and develop them. So I think you'd get yourself that much breathing space. To me, this league is so important, and the fact that we've got a much weaker squad than what we had last year is unforgivable, really. But listen, we are where we are, so we have to kind of support the team to try and get them over the line. I mean, I agree with Jim about the Ross County game. To me, if you look at Ibrox, they've got a pretty average team. They're grinding out results, and the crowd are going mental to celebrate them. And we should be doing the same because every point matters. If it's 1-0 at home at West County, 1-0 at home at St Mirren, whatever it is, that's vital that you just keep winning. Because we're not going to see. I've given up on seeing coherent, consistent performances this season because we just don't have the personnel for it. A lot of the issues that we're saying, as we say, isn't because we're being slower. It's just we're not very good. We've got players that can't execute a 30-yard pass through the lines as well as what the ones that we had last season. It's that simple, right? So find a way. And that's on Rodgers. It's almost. I'm at the stage where I don't care how we win. We just need to win this league somehow, anyhow. And if it means sacrificing a cup, I'm okay with that this season because it will make that much difference in terms of Scottish. Now it's going to be terrible for Scottish football actually if Celtic win the league this year because the bounty will be so huge that the gap between Celtic and the rest will become enormous. That's not our problem, but we must win this league.
Yeah, it's money that we really need to push on and strengthen. It's money that we also can't afford to lose as well. You can't afford to allow that money to go to Rangers because you know that they're going to go ahead and strengthen. But I want to bring in some of your comments here. Alistair Ross, we're one knockout blow away from losing this league. Tynecastle coming up could be it. I think that's mid-March time, perhaps towards the end of March. Hearts are flying at the moment. If you look at their recent records, that'll be a very tough game for us. Beyond Adam Ida, apart from his pens, he was invisible. So there's me told. I've got Michael89's comment, go to a back three and play Bernabe, Ralston, Johnson as wing backs. We can't trust any of our wingers at the moment and probably don't even deserve a start. But we're talking about how we need change. We need to see a reaction. Kevin, would you think a tactical change like that, going to a back three? I mean, sort of in the first half of the season, I was on the show with John Hughes quite a lot, and that was something he was championing for. Move to a 3-5-2 because you're not getting enough out of the wingers. Would that be a change that you would back?
I think it's too late in the day now. I think we're too far down the line. As I actually agree with Alan for once in the 47 minutes we've been on here. I think we're at the grinding out stage now, and Rodgers will possibly be in the same mindset, and he'll be putting together the team in his 4-3-3. Hoping that we can just grind out the results for now at the end of the season. The performances are now at the window. I think you saw that with the reaction to the last minute winner at Easter Road. The team were together. They were together with the away support and that as well. And that's all we've got. Look, I'm an unhappy clapper. I am an unhappy clapper, and you're talking about the swing of cash. In the longer term, that swing of cash could be a good thing for the structural change that we want in Celtic. It could be. Do we want to see it happen? Of course we don't, but that's the only thing that's going to bring about the structural change if this club ultimately fails. But that's a discussion for the summer. It's not a discussion for now. The discussion for now is we've got to go against St Mirren, match their effort, get our decent players on the ball, play slightly better than what we have been doing, create chances, then lose goals and win games. Sounds very easy, eh? But we've been making it very difficult for ourselves over the last couple of weeks, eh? But that's all we've got. All we can do now is give the team the full support for now at the end of the season. And it's nights like Wednesday night sometimes make it a wee bit difficult. And we are clutching at straws saying hopefully that's a turning point. Hopefully that's that turning point. Brendan, I'm just hoping for Matt O'Reilly turns up. I'm hoping that Matt O'Reilly gives Calmack that wee bit of space that allows them to start creating chances again. They through balls that Alan's been talking about. I'm hoping Aida brings something different than what Kyogo was bringing. A bit more of a physical presence that the big hoofers that are at the back at St Mirren as well maybe go, well, we haven't handled this guy before, and that might bring a bit of difference. We've got Yang back. I mean, we may as well chuck him back in because we've tried every other winger, so there's Dave, like we'll try him for 60 minutes and see what actually happens. We need to get in behind defences. We need to not let teams settle on the ball. We can't go back into the horseshoe, but we just need to grind out results from now to the end of the season. I'll be over the moon if we get to the end of the season, win the league. And if I haven't seen a performance, then in the summer I've gone, right, we need a major change. But as Jim says, we're still in it. I think we're dreadful at the moment. I do think we're dreadful at the moment. I'm worried about going to Love Street on Sunday. But the time the kickoff comes round, what is the kickoff, 2 o'clock? Is it 2 o'clock kickoff on Sunday? By the time the kickoff comes round on Sunday, I'll be fully batting the 11 guys that are on the pitch, definitely. And I'm not going to knock away for that. But I'll still be unhappy with the way my club's run. You can be both. You can be both.
Yeah, Kevin mentioned there's players that are going to be coming back. You're going to have Yang and O back from the Asian Cup, and if what Brendan Rodgers said last week is to be believed, you're going to have Greg Taylor back in contention as well. And you'd imagine, as much as Bernabe looked all right at Easter Road, you'd imagine that is Greg Taylor's spot to come straight back into, which it's surprising that we're all crying out for Greg Taylor back in the team, considering the stick that we've given him at the start of the season. I don't think he's had an incredible season, Greg Taylor. I think it's been poor by the standards that you look at him from the season before, but you really need him back in that team, I would say, Jim.
We need our first choice players back. We need our strongest team. That kind of goes without saying. I said a few weeks ago that I didn't understand why we weren't postponing games because of the Asian Cup. And I kind of wonder who takes those decisions. You know, we'd have, as well as the Asian Cup, with a few players injured. So why wouldn't you cancel Aberdeen away? And I wonder who takes those decisions, because I'd have cancelled it. You know, if we'd have cancelled it, wouldn't drop points. So, you know, don't understand that. So, hey ho, for another time. We need our best players on the pitch. If we get Carter Vickers back, hopefully soon, and we get Greg Taylor back, then Scales, as Alan says, has been really good this season. He's surpassed expectations. So we get back for what we like. I agree with the guys earlier that I don't think Bernardo's the answer. I think we've missed Hattati, and what annoyed me is the fact that Hattati never got played at the start of the season. Turnbull was picked instead of him, and Hattati hadn't played many games and he gets injured. And I think if you're not playing many games, I think it's easy to pick up injuries, and I think the treatment of Hattati and Kyogo has been really poor this season. But we need somebody in that third midfield position. Hattati's not back to April, is it? So he's worked out for the season. The wingers aren't contributing, and they're all much of a muchness, and that's why I think we're coming back to maybe change the shape. And I also think that the manager doesn't want to change the shape in case it works, and he looks as if, well, why didn't you do this 5 months ago? Because this was the way to go. And there's a kind of stubbornness, I think, there. So we're going to stick, as Kev said, we're going to stick 4-3-3, and we're going to grind out results, and this is how we're going to be. And if we win, great, and if we lose, hey ho, that's the way it is. And the big concern I have is some of the after-match comments from the manager. I use the word hungry. I just want him to be more enthusiastic. I want him to take more responsibility. I want him to lead. I don't know if we have many leaders on the pitch. I mean, in terms of experience, we've only got Callum McGregor, Joe Hart. Joe Hart's the keeper. At this stage of the season, when you're going for the league, you want leaders in your team. And that's why we should have bought experience at some point, either back in the summer transfer window or in January, and we didn't, and that was really negligent. But there's only 14 games to go, so a big effort, and everyone get behind the teams. And I think the fans at the time have been only too quick to start booing things. If we lose a goal against someone, Hearts game was pretty poor as well from a fan point of view. You know, that they are doing their best. They are playing their very best. That's all they can do. The fact that you think maybe they shouldn't have been in the team, that's not their fault, because it is what it is. So we have to all get behind the team. And as Alan said, even if it's a kind of scruffy 1-0 win against Ross County, celebrate it because we've won the game. I mean, people start booing at the end of the game. The players are confused by this, you know. And if you want to attract players to your team, what chance have you got? You know, so we need to get behind the team. And the away support are usually brilliant. I mean, they're the guys that could, and there's more mumblings and grumblings at home, I feel. And we need to stop that because they are doing their best, and it's counterproductive. You know, when you hear people start to boo and whatever, and you're losing 1-0, they need all the encouragement they can get. And we've only got 14 games to go. So 14 big cup finals. As long as we're going to Ibrox not behind, if we can maybe sneak a point or two ahead of them, then even if we lost at Ibrox, we get them back at Celtic Park. If we drop points before we get to Ibrox and we go there behind and we lose that game, that's the league finished. So We've got 14 quarter-finals. Get behind the team. We're still well in this thing. Brendan, step up to the mark, please.
Fingers crossed. Joe coming in the comments, Hatate is a massive miss for us. I would agree. I think you look over the course of the season, he's one of the, we've mentioned, Hatate is one of the players who will take risks. He takes risks with his passes, and that's what we've been crying out for when you're seeing the sideways passes over and over and over. But Alan, I want to come to yourself. If we're looking for changes to make for this game this weekend, look at the start 11 against Hibs compared to the team that you would like this weekend. What changes would you be looking for, personnel and in style, if you want to add to that as well?
I probably agree with Kevin. We're not likely to change shape now. So as much as I, from pretty early on in the season, was advocating going to a 4-4-2 diamond midfield, I felt that suited the players that we had. Would allow a player like Hatate some freedom to try the more outrageous kind of passes, but we'd have a sort of core solidity to it, and it would also allow, at the time, Maeda and Kyogo to play their more natural roles, which is as it's essentially forwards. And Maeda's been turned into a conventional winger, and it's just not his game. He's actually a pretty good striker or forward. But anyway, listen, we can wish for that, but I suspect it isn't going to happen. So I actually wouldn't. We're only playing one game a week at the moment. I know we had the game midweek, but I think we're going to move to pretty much one game a week. So there's no need. We need to get a cohesion, and if we're not going to have a highly structured way of playing, then as Kevin says, these relationships become more important. Players need to become used to playing with each other. So I'd keep the changes to be as minimal as they can be. I probably would take Abada out the firing line. I mean, the kid clearly has got the world on his shoulders. Whatever you might think about different situations, we're talking about a young man who seems to be going through an awful lot of anguish off the pitch, and then it seems to be affecting his performances on the pitch. So I would probably spare him, a difficult tie at St Mirren, to be honest with you. But other than that, we the biggest miss is Carter Vickers. If we can get Carter Vickers into a fit state and get him back, that he's the one player that would make the single biggest difference to the side. That's what we've got to hope for, really. But other than that, I wouldn't honestly make too many changes. I think we need to get into a rhythm of winning, even if it's winning ugly, and a cohesion and a consistency to the team.
Would you keep someone like? Oh,
sorry, James, back in there, Alan. Jim, I'll go back to you, Jim. The Ross County game, you're right, it's been very clear. I left on 70 minutes. I couldn't put up with it any longer. It was dreadful, and I just couldn't handle that game any longer. So I didn't have the energy to be at the final, so I was on my way. I was sitting on the supporters bus at that time. But I know for the rest of the season, starting next week against Kilmarnock, that the boys are going to need their batting. And everything that you say is absolutely true. It's not their fault that they're on the park.
Yeah.
It's the fault of the football operations, and that needs to get sorted. But it's not going to get sorted in the next 14 games. And what we need to do for the next 14 games is put all our differences aside and just hope the team scrape through. But I want to ask Alan on the stats, Hingley. We both agree that Rodgers is not going to change his 4-3-3, right? He's not going to change that. But what do you think it would change putting the wingers on the right side so they're actually naturally going to the byline? Steady this natural cut inside.
I mean, Maeda was even less effective on the right than he was on the left, because at least when he was on the left, he's making those, or he had been making those diagonal runs in towards the goal. You don't want him, as I say, you don't want him not facing towards goal, and you don't want him on his left foot. So you've got to get the ball to him in quite a specific set of circumstances. I think with Kuhn, it's a confidence thing. I think we probably need to kind of integrate him into the team quite gradually. He's another young player. Listen, he's played for big clubs. I'm excited about him in the long term, but with all these players, it takes time. To bed in. We've seen that even across the city with players they brought in. It takes time. Bernardo took time to bed in. It's just human nature and it's natural. So I suspect if we're going to win the league, we're going to win it with the players who've been here for a while, know the ropes. You know, I might be tempted to put actually Palmer on the right and leave Maida in, because at least you get the off ball benefits. He does stretch the opposition back line. As I say, I'm not advocating just constantly swapping somebody in out just because maybe they had an ineffective 10 minutes or 45 minutes, whatever. I don't think that's going to win us this league. I think we need to build cohesion and confidence towards the end of the season and keep the changes to the minimum.
Cohesion, confidence, and I think consistency are all things that we're looking for in this Celtic team. We've all got our fingers crossed for the massive Scottish Cup game this weekend, the 5th round in Paisley against St Mirren. Thank you, 1,000 of you have been consistently over this hour. Thank you very much for joining us on this Friday bulletin. Myself, Kevin Graham, Alan Morrison and Jim Orr, thank you for joining us. My Celtic State of Mind.